There's a channel out of Hurricane, Utah that built its entire empire on one simple idea. Real people, real recoveries, no script. Matt's Off-Road Recovery didn't need Hollywood production or a PR team. It had something better. It had a crew that felt like family and millions of viewers who tuned in every week just to watch that family work. At its peak, the comment sections weren't just full of people praising the rescues. They were full of people asking about Rudy, cheering for Lizzy, laughing at Tucker, and wondering what Skeeter was up to. The crew wasn't just background noise, they were the show. But somewhere between 2022 and 2024, that all started to change. Quietly, without much warning, the faces that built Moore's loyal fanbase began disappearing one by one. First Rudy, then Skeeter and Trevor, then Tucker, then Lizzy, the channel's biggest star, then TomTom, one of Matt's oldest friends, and then even Hefe, the man who essentially ran the entire operation behind the scenes. 6 major departures in roughly 2 years. No blow-ups, no public drama, no feuds playing out in comment sections. Just gone. And that's exactly what makes this story so interesting. Because when there's no explosion to point to, no villain to blame, you have to ask a harder question. What actually happens to a channel when it outgrows the people who built it? That's what we're getting into today. To understand why so many people left, you first have to understand what Matt's Off-Road Recovery actually was before it became what it is today. Because the channel that exists now, with its merchandise store, its off-road record games, its app, and its polished production, looks almost nothing like the operation that first captured the Internet's attention back in 2019. When Matt Wetzel launched the channel on March 28th of that year, there was no grand strategy, no content calendar, no brand deals lined up, no carefully planned thumbnail formula. It was just a towing operator in Hurricane, Utah, who figured out that people might actually want to watch him do his job. And it turned out they really did. The scenery alone was enough to pull you in. Red rock canyons, desert trails, the kind of landscapes that make a stuck Jeep look cinematic. But what kept people coming back wasn't the locations. It was the people. From the very beginning, MORR ran on a crew that felt less like co-workers and more like a group of friends who happened to be very good at getting vehicles unstuck. Matt's oldest son, Rudy, was there from the jump, a natural on camera, quick with a joke, and genuinely skilled with his hands. TomTom had known Matt since the mid-1990s, one of those friendships so old it barely needs explaining. Hefe, Matt's nephew, wasn't just showing up to swing a camera. He was quietly running the entire back end of the operation, handling accounts, logistics, HR, and everything in between. Lizzy, who grew up connected to Matt's family through her father Stuart, became one of the most beloved figures on the channel almost immediately. Viewers watched her grow from a crew member into a genuinely skilled welder and recovery expert right in front of their eyes. Then there was Trevor behind the camera, Skeeter sourcing parts and working recoveries, and Tucker, brought on in 2021 as the channel's first dedicated editor, holding the whole visual identity of the show together. That crew, in that specific combination, is what made More feel like something worth watching every single week. It wasn't just competence, it was chemistry, the kind you can't manufacture and can't replace once it's gone. Fans who started watching in those early days will tell you the same thing. There was an energy to those videos, something scrappy and unpolished and completely genuine, that the channel has never quite been able to recreate. That energy had a shelf life. And 2022 is when the clock started running out. The first domino to fall was the one nobody saw coming, not because Rudy was the most surprising person to leave, but because of what his departure represented. He wasn't just another crew member, he was Matt's oldest son, the guy most fans assumed would eventually take over the whole operation. And when he quietly walked away in April of 2022, it sent a signal that not everyone inside MORR was as comfortable with the channel's direction as it looked from the outside. Rudy had been there from the beginning. He could weld, he could fabricate, he could drive recovery vehicles through terrain that would make most people turn around. On camera, he came across as relaxed and capable, the kind of person you'd genuinely want next to you when things went sideways on a trail. But behind the scenes, something wasn't clicking. The channel's filming schedule was relentless. 3 videos a week doesn't happen by accident, and keeping that pace meant everyone on the crew was locked into a rhythm that left very little room for anything else. In an interview with the YouTube channel Decent Garage, Rudy opened up about exactly that. He said the tight schedule at MORR gave him almost no space to tell his own story. Every job, every recovery, every build, it all fed into Matt's channel, Matt's brand, Matt's timeline. And at a certain point, Rudy decided he wanted to build something of his own instead of being a supporting character in someone else's. So he left. No blow-up, no bad blood. Matt fully supported the decision, and the two have remained on good terms ever since, collaborating publicly on multiple occasions after the split. But what Rudy built after walking away is what really puts his departure into perspective. He launched Rudy's Adventure and Design, Red, in early 2022, and within less than 2 years, the channel had crossed 250,000 subscribers. He was doing fabrication work on his own terms, covering his own projects, competing at events like King of the Oz, Hammers, and growing an audience that was entirely his. The lesson wasn't hard to read. The same platform that made Moore's crew recognizable to millions of people had also given them the tools to walk out the door and build something independently. Rudy proved it could be done, and whether anyone on the crew was paying attention or not, he wouldn't be the last one to figure that out. If you asked the average MORR viewer to name the one person they never expected to see leave, the answer would almost always be the same. Lizzy. She wasn't just popular, she was the kind of presence that made the channel feel like itself. Warm, capable, genuinely funny without trying to be, and skilled in ways that consistently surprised people who weren't expecting a young woman in a rodeo belt buckle to outweld half the crew. From the moment she appeared on the channel, she felt permanent, like part of the furniture in the best possible way, which is exactly why the signs, looking back, were so easy to miss. Lizzy had grown up connected to Matt's world through her father Stuart, one of Matt's oldest friends. That kind of history made her feel like family rather than an employee, and on screen that relationship came through naturally. She learned welding on the job, developed into a genuine recovery expert, and became one of the most recognizable faces in the entire off-road YouTube community, not just on Moore but across the niche. Fan favorite didn't quite cover it. She was the anchor. But Lizzy had a life happening outside the camera frame that most viewers weren't fully tracking. In September of 2022, she married her husband Clancy, and the couple began making plans to relocate to Kane County, Utah, where Clancy's family ranched. Lizzy had been open about her love of horses, rodeo, and the kind of wide-open agricultural life that looked very different from spending her days in a fabrication shop pulling stuck vehicles out of sand. The dream was always the ranch. MORR had just been where she was in the meantime. In early 2023, she went part-time, splitting her attention between the channel and her new life with Clancy. By July of that year, the decision was made. MORR posted a dedicated goodbye video titled, "I Never Expected This." And just like that, it was official. Matt sent her off with a brand new black Ford F-150 FX4, a send-off that said everything about the kind of relationship they had. No hard feelings, no awkward silence, just genuine mutual respect between two people who had built something real together and were now going their separate ways. Lizzy has been largely absent from social media since leaving, occasionally surfacing in a photo with former crew members, but otherwise living the quiet ranch life she always wanted. For longtime fans, her departure hit differently than the others. Because when Lizzy left, the last thread connecting the channel to its original identity went with her. What remained was a new version of More. Successful, still growing, but fundamentally different from the show that had made people fall in love with it in the first place. If Rudy's departure was the warning shot, what happened next was something closer to a full collapse of the original lineup. Because within the span of just a few months in late 2022 and early 2023, More lost 3 more familiar faces in quick succession, and this time there was almost no explanation given at all. Skeeter and Trevor were both gone by October of 2022. No goodbye video, no dedicated send-off, no announcement. Fans simply started noticing their absence in the comments, the way you notice when a regular at your local spot stops showing up. The speculation online was immediate. Were they fired? Was there a falling out? Had something happened behind the scenes that Matt wasn't willing to talk about publicly? The comment sections filled up fast, and the questions weren't going away. Matt eventually addressed it, briefly, in an October 2022 video titled, "Is This Enough for the World's Largest Wrecker?" He kept it simple. Skeeter and Trevor had moved on. They weren't fired. Everyone was still on good terms. That was about as much as he was willing to offer, and for a lot of fans, it only deepened the mystery rather than putting it to rest. The reality, as it turned out, was far less dramatic than the comment sections wanted it to be. Trevor had picked up a new job closer to home, climbing communications towers, a career pivot that had nothing to do with MORR and everything to do with his own circumstances. Skeeter packed up and relocated to the Texas oil fields, trading Utah Red Rock for oil country and a completely different chapter of his life. 2 guys, 2 separate decisions, 2 paths that simply led away from Hurricane. Then in February of 2023, Tucker disappeared. No on-screen farewell, no explanation in a dedicated video. Matt answered a viewer comment about it and kept it brief. Tucker had decided to try his hand at freelancing, and the team respected that decision. For a guy who had been gifted a 2016 Toyota 4Runner by Matt, just a year earlier, and who had been given oversight of the entire editing department, the quiet exit raised plenty of eyebrows. What nobody could have predicted at the time was that all 3 of them would eventually end up in the same place. In June of 2023, Trevor and Tucker launched a new YouTube channel called Misadventure Lab, and Skeeter has since made appearances there too. 3 former MORR staples building something new together on the other side of their departures. The original crew was now more than half gone, and the biggest exit was still coming. By the time Lizzy's goodbye video had finished making the rounds online, most fans had quietly accepted that MORR was never going to look the way it once did. The original crew was gone. The channel had moved on. And while the content kept coming and the subscriber count kept climbing, there was a grief sitting in the comment sections that no amount of new faces could fully address. People were still watching, but they were watching differently, with one eye on the screen and the other on the past, which made TomTom's departure in late 2023 feel less like a shock and more like the last chapter of a story that had already been written. TomTom wasn't a crew member in the traditional sense. He wasn't there to operate equipment or handle logistics or manage the editing pipeline. What he brought to MORR was something harder to quantify: history. He had known Matt since the mid-1990s, back before the channel, before the towing business had grown into what it became, back when they were just 2 guys from the same corner of the world with a long shared history between them. That kind of friendship doesn't show up on a resume, and it doesn't get replaced when the person walks out the door. His exit from the channel raised immediate questions, the way any long-term departure does when the history runs that deep. Fans who had been watching since the early days understood instinctively that TomTom wasn't just another employee making a career move. He was part of the original fabric of the thing, So when he stopped appearing in videos without much fanfare, the speculation started up again in comment sections and forums. The same pattern that had played out with Skeeter and Trevor, with Tucker, and with Lizzy before him. TomTom put the speculation to rest himself. In a YouTube video on his own channel, he addressed the departure directly and kept it straightforward. He was focusing on his business, TomTom's shop, and building out his own presence on social media and YouTube. He and Matt were still friends. The exit had nothing to do with any falling out, and everything to do with where he wanted to take his own life professionally. It was the same story the channel had heard several times by this point. Someone choosing their own path over the demands of someone else's operation. Clean, amicable, and quietly devastating for the fans who had been holding on to the idea that some version of the original crew might still find its way back together. It wouldn't. There was still one more departure to come. There's a version of this story where Hefe leaving is the most surprising chapter of all. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't. Not because it ended badly, it didn't. But because of what Hefe actually was to MORR underneath the surface. Rudy was the sun, Lizzy was the star, TomTom was the old friend. But Hefe was the infrastructure. He was the reason the whole machine kept running when the cameras weren't rolling, and losing him meant losing something that most viewers never even knew was there. His full name is Jeff, and he's Matt's nephew. He came to the channel not just as a family member willing to help out, but as a 16-year veteran of the Army National Guard with the kind of operational discipline that a fast-growing media business desperately needs. While Matt was out on trails pulling stuck vehicles out of sand and rock, Hefe was back at base handling accounts, managing budgets, running the website, overseeing the crew roster, coordinating events, and keeping the human resources side of a rapidly expanding operation from falling apart. The crew called him Jefe, Spanish for boss, because that's functionally what he was. Matt's second in command in every meaningful sense of the word. On screen, Jefe came across as methodical and measured, a natural counterbalance to Matt's more instinctive, figure-it-out-as-you-go approach. Off-screen, he was the person making sure the bills got paid and the operation stayed organized. For years, that combination of roles made him irreplaceable. But irreplaceable and permanent aren't the same thing, and by mid-2024, the circumstances of Jefe's life were pushing him in a new direction, whether he was ready for it or not. His retirement from the Army National Guard in mid-2024 created a natural inflection point. With that chapter of his life officially closed, Jefe took a hard look at what he actually wanted to do next. And what he kept coming back to wasn't spreadsheets or scheduling software. It was the road, the adventures, the parts of working at MORR that had nothing to do with sitting behind a desk. He had his own YouTube channel to build, his own stories to tell, and a restlessness that the administrative side of someone else's business was never going to satisfy. Matt didn't just accept the decision, he encouraged it. Jefe launched his own channel, Jefe's Adventures. And in a detail that says everything about how that relationship actually works, Matt's team still handles the editing for it. Jefe kept his promise to appear in his uncle's videos occasionally. The door stayed open. But the day-to-day role that had held so much of more together quietly disappeared with him. 6 departures, 6 different reasons. And somehow, through all of it, the channel kept going.